The land was holding its breath that evening. Grass bent low beneath a tired wind, the kind that carried old stories but never finished them. The sky bruised itself purple and gold as the sun slid away, leaving the desert colder than it looked. Somewhere far off, a lone bird cried, then thought better of it and went quiet. A cowboy rode through that stillness like a man already half remembered. He was not young, though the years had not broken him either. 34 winters had passed over his shoulders, each leaving something behind. A habit of listening, a way of riding slow, as if rushing might wake a grief that slept best when left alone. Folks in the nearest settlement called him lonely, and they were not wrong. But loneliness had become a language to him, one he spoke fluently, without bitterness. His horse knew the way without being told. Hooves pressed into the earth gently, as if apologizing for the intrusion. The rifle rested across his saddle, not in readiness, but in routine. He had learned long ago that the land did not respond well to arrogance. It answered patience better. Then the wind shifted. It brought with it the sound of breath that did not belong to the horse, nor the man. Ragged, running, afraid, the horse slowed before the cowboy asked it to. Animals always knew first. From the tall grass came a shape, stumbling more than running, dark hair loose and tangled, a body moving on instinct alone. She fell once, caught herself, and kept going, as if stopping might mean never rising again. Behind her, the night grew teeth. Yellow eyes appeared one by one, low to the ground, circling. Wolves, not driven by cruelty, only by hunger sharpened by winter. Their bodies flowed over the earth like shadows learning to breathe. The woman did not scream. That was the first thing the cowboy noticed. Her silence was not bravery. It was endurance, the kind that comes from knowing screams waste breath, and breath was precious. He did not think. He did not need to. The rifle came up, steady, familiar. A shot cracked the air, loud enough to tear the quiet apart. One wolf fell back, startled more than wounded. Fire followed, a quick blaze sparked from dry grass and flint, light thrown into the dark like a challenge. The wolves hesitated. Hunger argued with caution. The man stood between them and the woman without flourish, without promise. Just a body placed where danger had been. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, the eyes withdrew, melting back into the land that had lent them shape. The night exhaled. Only then did the woman collapse. He crossed the space between them slowly, hands open, palms visible. He had learned that speed frightened people who had already known too much of it. She was younger than he first thought. 22, maybe. Her face was dirt-streaked, a thin cut along her brow leaking red into her hair. Her dress was torn, her ankle swelling fast. Apache. He knew enough to see that much, though he did not let the word shape his thoughts. She tried to rise when he reached her, did not succeed. It would have been easier if she had begged. Easier if fear had made her small. But she only watched him, dark eyes steady despite the pain, measuring him the way wounded animals measure storms. He knelt at a distance, not close enough to crowd her. "You're safe now," he said, quietly, not as a promise. As a hope. She did not answer. The fire crackled beside them, warmth pushing back the cold inch by inch. He offered her water. She hesitated, then took it, fingers brushing the tin cup with care, as if the wrong touch might shatter something fragile. He wrapped her ankle gently, using cloth torn from his own sleeve. His hands were rough but careful, as if they knew the cost of being careless. When she flinched, he stopped, waited, let her breathe. Above them, the stars came out one by one, ancient and indifferent. He did not ask her name. He did not ask where she came from or where she was going. Those questions could wait. Or maybe they did not need answers at all. The wolves howled once more in the distance, frustrated, not defeated. She looked toward the sound, then back at him. Something shifted in her gaze. Not trust, not yet, but the faintest easing, like a knot loosened by one careful pull. She had been running for longer than this night. That much was clear. Running from men who saw her as something to claim or discard. From a world that mistook her resilience for invitation, her silence for surrender. This man did neither. He rose, offered his hand only after she had time to see it. When she took it, her grip was strong despite the tremor in her arm. They moved toward his camp together, step by measured step. The fire followed them in memory, the wolves in echo, behind them, The land closed its wound, grass whispering back into place. Ahead of them, something unnamed waited. And for the first time in a long while, neither of them walked alone. Morning came softly, as if afraid to disturb what the night had spared. Light crept through the thin cracks of the cabin walls, pale and unsure, touching the floor before it touched the people. Dust drifted in that light, slow and patient, floating like time itself had decided to rest a while. The woman woke first. Pain greeted her before memory did. A dull throb in her ankle, a tightness in her ribs. But beneath it all, something unfamiliar. Stillness. No hands grabbing. No voices demanding. No need to run. She lay there listening. The cabin breathed. Wood settling. Wind brushing the walls. Somewhere outside, a horse shifted its weight. And nearby, the quiet presence of another human being, moving carefully, as though even his footsteps were asking permission. He was at the small table when she sat up, back turned, pouring water into a tin cup. He did not startle when he noticed her awake, did not rush to speak, just nodded once, acknowledging her as one might acknowledge the morning itself. That he set the cup down where she could reach it, then stepped away. The shelter between them was not the cabin. It was the space he kept. Days unfolded the same way. He checked her ankle each morning, hands gentle, movements deliberate. He never lingered, never assumed. When the pain was sharp, she hissed through her teeth, and he paused immediately, eyes lifting to her face, waiting, always waiting. She learned the sound of his patience. She helped where she could. Sitting by the door, she cleaned herbs she recognized from long before this place. Crushed leaves between stones. The familiar sense grounded her, pulling her back into herself piece by piece. Sometimes they worked side by side, without a word passing between them. Sometimes words came anyway, simple ones. About weather. About how the land changed its mind without warning. About how silence could be heavy or kind, depending on who shared it with you. He never asked why she had been running. She never asked why he lived so far from everyone else. The settlement lay a short ride away, just close enough to remind them of its presence. He went there for supplies once she could stand without help. Returned quieter than before. She noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way he scrubbed his hands longer than necessary, as if the stairs had left something on his skin. Later, she learned why the storekeeper's eyes had followed her too closely. A preacher's voice had softened in a way that did not reach his eyes, and a man she did not know had laughed, low and unkind, asking whose woman she was. She felt the old familiar closing in her chest then. The instinct to disappear, but the cowboy had answered simply, "She is with me." Not possession, not explanation, just fact. He did not look at her when he said it, did not wait for approval. And when they left, he rode at the same unhurried pace, as though nothing had happened at all. That night, she spoke of another man, not his name. Names gave too much power. She spoke of a life where strength had been mistaken for usefulness, where she had been admired only when silent, tolerated only when obedient. The moment she needed gentleness, the moment she could no longer carry everything alone, she had been set aside. The cowboy listened, but he did not interrupt, did not offer fixes. He did not tell her she was strong, because she already knew that, and strength had not saved her before. When she finished, the fire had burned low. He added another piece of wood, watching the sparks rise. "People think quiet means empty," he said at last. "They don't see what it holds." She looked at him then, really looked. There was a loneliness in him that did not beg to be filled, a steadiness shaped by years of being overlooked, chosen last, or not at all. In the days that followed, trust did not arrive all at once. It came in fragments. In the way he left the door open, so she never felt trapped. In the way he slept far enough away that she could breathe easily. In the way he asked before touching, even when offering help. Once, she caught him repairing the tear in her dress with clumsy stitches, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up, embarrassed, as if he had been caught doing something too personal. She smiled before she could stop herself. It startled both of them. The wolves did not return, but their howl sometimes echoed at night, distant reminders of what the land was capable of. She found that she did not flinch when she heard them anymore. One evening, as the sky turned the color of old copper, she stood outside the cabin alone. Her ankle still ached, but it held her weight. The horizon stretched wide and open, terrifying and beautiful. He joined her without speaking. They stood shoulder to shoulder, not touching, yet closer than she had stood to anyone in a long time. For the first time since she could remember, fear loosened its grip, and that frightened her more than the wolves ever had, because safety, once felt, asked a question that danger never did. What if this could last? The land had grown softer between them, like a well-worn blanket that held the warmth of many quiet nights. The cabin was still, dust motes rising in the streams of light that fell like gentle fingers across the floor. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying stories that neither had to speak to understand. They decided to travel a short way together, not far, just enough to feel the land beyond the cabin's walls. He rode with a careful patience, matching her steps along uneven ground, letting her set the pace. She walked steadily, though each breath carried the memory of running, of being hunted, of nights that refused sleep. They did not speak at first. Words were unnecessary when silence could cradle them both. She noticed small things, the way his shoulders moved with the rhythm of the land, how his eyes caught the light at dusk, how his hands, rough and scarred, moved with deliberate care when he adjusted the strap on her ankle. She began to see him, not as a savior, not as a man to measure against others, but as someone who understood the quiet language of endurance. Daiti was near a stream, the water murmuring over rocks, that she finally spoke. Her voice was low, careful, like a bird testing the wind before flight. "I have been seen as strong before," she said, "but only when I was quiet, only when I could be bent to someone else's design. When I needed help, when I needed gentleness, they did not stay." He listened. He had no words to fix the past. That had never been his way. Instead, he let her speak until the air was full of her truths, letting the weight of them settle where it needed, like pebbles falling softly to the bottom of a clear stream. Then he spoke. Not to rescue, not to instruct, but simply to lay himself beside her honesty. "I have been chosen last," he said, "and sometimes not at all. People see the quiet and assume nothing waits there. They never see the years that built it, the space that had to be carved by patience and silence." She watched him, really watched, and something inside her shifted. For the first time, she saw that he understood her, not because he had to, not because he sought glory, but because he had lived in the same quiet spaces herself and had learned to respect what waited there. The sun was slipping low, spilling gold across the grass and painting the sky with the soft edges of an old memory. The world seemed to hold its breath with them, listening to the gentle hum of two lives finally acknowledging each other. And then she spoke the words that had hovered in the air like a fragile bird. "You're my man now." She did not say it to claim him, not as a possession, not as a desperate anchor. She said it as recognition, a truth spoken once and never to be repeated, the kind that fills the space between two souls and leaves it heavier, warmer, alive. He did not answer immediately. Some truths are too vast for quick words. He let her words rest in the space between them, letting the land itself hold the echo. And then, in the quiet that followed, he reached out, not to touch, but to stand beside her, letting the world know that he had heard. The journey back to the cabin was slow. Neither spoke, yet the silence was different now, full, steady, and knowing. When they arrived, the fire was waiting, crackling softly as if it had understood the gravity of what had been said. Night fell gently over the cabin. Shadows leaned against walls and corners, but they were no longer threatening. The weight of the day's truths made the darkness soft, like velvet pressing against skin. They sat across from each other, close enough to feel the warmth, but far enough to let each keep their space, their autonomy, their dignity. He offered her water. She drank. No hand lingered unnecessarily. No glance demanded more than it could safely take. The words had done their work. Trust, patience, and recognition had opened a space between them, and in that space, love could begin to breathe. Later, she stepped outside, looking at the horizon where stars already began to blink awake. The wind brushed her hair, carrying the scent of earth and fire. She felt him behind her, not shadowing, not hovering, just present. The world beyond the cabin had not changed. Wolves still roamed distant hills, the land still tested those who walked it, and people still misunderstood what they did not see. But she had found a place where she was truly seen. And he had found someone whose presence demanded nothing but honesty. The quiet grew deeper. Words became unnecessary. The connection had moved past speech into the realm of being. The land around them seemed to notice, bending slightly to shelter what had been spoken, honoring the delicate balance of two lives aligning without ceremony. That night, the fire burned low, stars watched silently, and the wind told stories only they could understand. They slept, not holding, not reaching, but together in a way that no action could define. And for the first time since the wolves had chased her, she felt the profound safety of being beside someone who did not ask her to be anything she was not. She knew then that she had spoken the words only once because they needed no repetition. Some truths, once recognized, were enough to fill the world entire, and he stayed. That was the answer. The land had a memory older than any man or woman could claim. It remembered droughts that drew the rivers thin, storms that tore at the cliffs, the cry of wolves that once hunted across the plains. And tonight, it held the memory of two people who had learned to exist within its vast, indifferent embrace, quietly, gently, fully. The settlement lay far enough to be a presence, near enough to remind them of the world beyond the cabin. Whispers had followed them. Rumors of the woman rescued by the lonely cowboy, murmurs of impropriety and curiosity, voices that wondered why he had chosen to shelter her. A choice awaited him: to return to his solitary life, predictable and safe, or to step into something uncertain, something that felt both fragile and unbreakable. That he rode into the valley, the wind carrying a soft chill that tugged at his coat, the horse moving slow as if sensing the weight of decision. She walked beside him, not holding, not trailing, simply there, steadfast. She had learned to trust the quiet, to trust the space between words, to trust him without expectation. The first man, the one from her past who had sought control, arrived unexpectedly, riding hard with the arrogance of certainty. He called to her, demanding, as though she could ever belong to someone who had never seen her. Her eyes met the cowboy's. In that instant, no words were needed. She had already spoken her truth once, and it had been heard. The first man's presence was a shadow, a test, and the cowboy faced it without hesitation. Not with violence, not with threats, but with clarity. His hand rested on the saddle, steady, unyielding. He did not explain, did not argue. He simply walked away from the settlement's judgment, back toward the open land where they had learned to breathe, to exist without permission, to survive without spectacle. The Apache woman followed. Her steps were confident now. She did not cling. She did not bow. She walked beside him, equal in every measure. The land remembered the small victories of their patience, their shared understanding, their quiet courage. Wolves howled somewhere far away, but their threat had passed. The world had not changed, but they had. Back at the cabin, they moved together through the familiar spaces, touching the wood that had absorbed their silences, breathing in the smell of fire and dust. Seasons began to turn, spring stretching green across the plains, summer burning gold, autumn bleeding color into the mountains, and winter whispering snow over the land. With each passing season, their bond grew, not in hurried declarations, but in shared moments, mending a fence, tending the horse, watching the stars, speaking truths only when necessary. The cowboy, once isolated by choice and circumstance, had discovered a companion who saw him as he was. The woman, once hunted and undervalued, had found a protector who asked nothing of her beyond her presence. Together, they moved through the land like a story written in the spaces between wind and grass, fire and shadow. The climax of their lives was not thunderous. It was subtle, quiet, and unwavering. One night, under a sky brushed with the faintest streaks of dawn, she turned to him and said, softly, just as she had before, "You are my man now." He smiled, a small lift of lips and eyes that held everything he had never said. And in that smile, in that acknowledgement, the world seemed to exhale. They did not need a ceremony, a declaration, a witness. They needed only the land and each other, and both remembered. Time passed. People came and went. Curiosity faded, but their lives settled into a rhythm as natural as the wind shaping the plains. Wolves still roamed, storms still raged, and the world continued to test those who walked it. But inside their shared space, the cabin and the land surrounding it, safety, understanding, and love were constants. The universal truth of their story became clear in its simplicity. Love does not always arrive with grand gestures. It grows in patience. It blooms in the quiet. It exists where respect and understanding meet, where two souls choose to remain beside each other even when the world insists otherwise. They stood together one evening, watching the horizon glow with the last touch of sunlight, and the wind carried their laughter softly across the plains. It was a sound not born of fear, not born of expectation, but of recognition of lives once fractured, now joined in calm harmony. And as the fire flickered low, as the stars blinked awake one by one, they understood that the land remembered not only the wolves and the storms, but the gentleness, the patience, the courage it had witnessed. And so, in a world that often tested them, they thrived quietly, fully, finally free. Call to action, direct to audience. Some love does not roar. Some love whispers, waits, and grows in the spaces between fear and hope. If this story has touched you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Share where you are watching from tonight, and carry with you the reminder that gentle love still exists, patient, steady, and true.